In this video, I'm going to walk you step by step through my Lola Crossbody. You can make yours out of cork. I have this one with canvas on top. You can mix and match different fabrics. In today's video, I'm going to be using wax canvas for the top. The only thing that needs to be cork or vinyl, something that's non-fraying, is the handle. Unless you want to make your own changes, instructions for a cotton handle are not included in the pattern. So let's take a look inside. Lola is a small bag, but it does have plenty of room for all of your essentials. There's a zipper on the top. There's a divider. This is attached on the sides as well as the bottom, so you definitely have two separate compartments. And then there is a large zippered pocket on the inside, and that's how we're going to turn our bag right side out. So let's go ahead and take a look at the materials. For my bag today, I've chosen to use this pretty green canvas. This is a wax canvas for my top pieces. So I have two cut and marked for piece A. I also have my cork strips for B. That's going to be my handle. My bottom is the same printed cork, so this is my two C pieces. These are directional, but it's totally fine for this pattern. I'll just have to make sure that my pieces are upright when I'm sewing them. I have my two pieces here for my lining already interfaced. These are my D pieces. So I have my decor bond already on those. I'm just using a really pretty yarn dyed Essex linen. I have my E, which is my pocket piece. This is for the inside zippered pocket. I also have two pieces for F. This is going to be for the divider. And then I have my 4 strips for G, which is the recessed zipper. So let's take a look at some of the other things that we'll need for our bag. Aside from my sewing machine, my mat, ruler, and rotary cutter, I also have my hardware and zipper. So I'm using some of the Zipper by the Yard. This is the natural with silver. I have my pulls for my zippered pocket as well as my top recess zipper. I have my 1/2-inch slide set. So a slide set is a rectangle. That's going to be for your tab as well as the slide itself. And then I'm going to add a handmade tag, and I'll show you a great place to add that onto your bag as well. Totally optional, but I like to add those on. Some other tools that I'm going to need are, of course, my marking tools. I always have a chalk pencil and a regular pen. Depends on what I'm marking and where I'm marking it, so I like to have some options. I have my 4-in-1 tool. This has a stiletto, a turning tool, and also a seam ripper underneath. I have my 1/4-inch wide fusible tape. This is going to be for the recessed zipper as well as the zippered pocket, and I'll show you how I use that for both. My scissors, of course, pins, and clips. Step 1 is fusing. I have here my A, my D, and my F pieces, so let's go through those. As far as the A is concerned, I am choosing to use a wax canvas for today, so I did not add interfacing. I have seen other bag makers add interfacing to wax canvas, and that's totally fine if you would like to. Whenever I work with it, I choose not to. I like the crinkled effect that I get, and the interfacing takes a little bit of that away. So for me, I don't bother to interface this. If the pieces were cork, I would also not interface those. So these A pieces for the top don't have any interfacing. I have here for my lining my D as well as my F pieces. These are always going to get interfaced unless you are using something like a waterproof canvas. So these are my lining pieces. This is where the zippered pocket will go. And this is going to be for my divider. So I always want to have some interfacing on these pieces because I want my divider to stand up and I want my lining pieces to be sturdy enough to hold a zippered pocket. So I've already gone ahead and added decor bond to these. You can also use Decoville Light, or if you have a different interfacing that you would like, you can definitely experiment. As far as the pattern is concerned, it does call for decor bond, and that is what I'm using. So let's move on to step 2, and step 2 is making your handle. So I have my B pieces here. I'm going to set these aside. And just like any adjustable handle, I'm going to need to sew these two pieces together first and do my top stitching before I can add my hardware. So one of the things that I like to do, and this is a new thing that I've started doing, the pattern is going to show you a little bit differently. The pattern is going to have you sew these two pieces together end to end. So I'm going to do that. I'll grab a clip here. So I'm just going to line up my short ends so I can make one nice long handle. And I'm going to take this to the machine and sew a 1/4 inch. In the pattern, it's going to tell you that after you sew this 1/4 inch, you should press this seam open. And you can do that, but what I've been doing lately is actually splitting this seam and pressing it in opposite directions. I find that it lays just as flat as it does when it's open, but it's a little bit stronger and I like it better. So what I'm gonna do is take this to my machine, sew 1/4 of an inch, and then I'll show you how to split my seam, and then I'll show you how I top stitch. I took my B strips to the machine and I sewed them together. So now I have one nice long strip. That's gonna be for my adjustable handle. And in the pattern, it's going to tell you to take this over to your iron and press the seam open. But here's what I've been doing instead, and I've been liking this technique a little bit better. Just like with anything, we evolve as bag makers as well. So I am cutting right up to, but not through my stitching. So I just cut in the middle. I kind of eyeball it. And then what I'm going to do is take this over. You can do this at the iron or you can just do it with your fingers. And I'm going to press my seams in opposite directions. And by doing that, I've eliminated a lot of the bulk. Let me bring this nice and close so you can see. So I've eliminated the bulk by pressing the seams in the opposite direction, but it's really strong and sturdy. So I've been doing this a lot more lately and I really like this technique. And what I'm gonna do, and I don't use clips for this, but you absolutely can. I'll just show you how this looks. I am pressing my piece in half. And because it's cork, taking this to the ironing board is really not gonna make much of a difference. By pressing it, it's not gonna stay. So if you prefer, you can use clips like this. I just hold it at the machine. But what I'm gonna do is fold it in half, and I'm gonna top stitch on each side 1/8 of an inch. On a lot of my handles, I do 1/8 and 1/4, but because this is a 1/2 inch handle and it's not that wide, I think 1/8 of an inch on each side is fine. I'm gonna do the entire handle and then I'll show you how to trim this down for your tab and how to put your hardware on. I top stitched on either side of my long handle. I did 1/8 of an inch and I use my blind hem foot. On my Janome, that's my G foot, and I just put the foot right here and let it glide right along the edge using the center guide to make that nice 1/8 of an inch stitching. It's my favorite way to do an 1/8 inch, and I have a video on that as well if you want to watch. I'm sure any of your machines will have either a stitch in the ditch or a blind hem foot, something with a center guide that will help you with this. I went ahead and as per the pattern, I cut off a piece for my tab. And so now it's time to put the hardware on. So I'm going to take my slide set here and I'm going to add that on to one end of my long handle. It does not matter which end. And I'm just going to loop that up and over that center bar. So I'll show you again. Let me bring it in a little bit closer. So I just hold that bar between my fingers. I loop this up and over the center, just like that. And because this is cork, I don't have to fold my edges. I don't have to worry that there's a raw edge here. I bring it down about 1 inch to 3/4. It really doesn't make a big difference, so don't stress about that. And I'm just gonna add a clip. I can take this to my machine and I'm just gonna stitch back and forth a few times across there. So let me do that, and then I will also take my tab over. So I'm gonna take the tab, and again, I'm going to take this and just loop it right over. And I'm gonna fold this. I don't like to fold it all the way to the end. If I do that, it gets bulky in the finishing steps. So I'm gonna fold it about 2/3 of the way. This is not important. If you fold it a little further than I did or a little bit less, it's not a problem. Just don't fold it so the ends meet. You want to eliminate some bulk. So I'm going to add a clip to that as well, and I'll take both of those to the machine and stitch, and then I'll show you how to put them together and finish this up. I have my handle and my tab all set. So I took this over to the machine and I just stitched back and forth a few times. I'll go ahead and just trim my threads. If you watched my Fiona video, you will see why I like to match my top and bobbin thread, why I like them to be the same color and close to the color of the piece I'm working on, because in that video, I did not make a new bobbin and I had 2 different colors and one of my handles was facing the wrong way or the way that I didn't want it. So I always like to match my top and bobbin thread. It's probably one of the best tips I can give you. So now that I have this together, I'm just gonna put my handle, I kind of fold it in half, make sure that it is not twisted at all. We don't want to twist in our handle. I'm going to take my tab here and just loop this right over here, leave it loose, and then bring this end up and back down. So now I have a nice long piece. I've got my handle and my tab, and I just realized I forgot to do something, so I'm gonna run back over to the machine quick. I only stitched down here in my tab. I did not stitch closer up here to my rectangle ring, and I wanna do that because I don't want this to turn. So before I finish, I'm just gonna run over and just stitch really quickly right across. I went ahead and fixed that little error. I added a little bit of extra stitching up towards my square here so that it doesn't move too much. You don't want this to flip around while you're using your bag. So my handle is done. There's no twists. Everything is good. So I'm going to set this aside. I am finished with step 2 for now. And I'm going to move on to step 3, which is making the outside of my bag. So I have my top pieces, I have my bottom pieces, and I have some clips. And it's very simple. All I'm going to do is take one top, which is my A, and one bottom, which is my C. Keep double checking to make sure I give you the right letters. And I'm just going to place those right sides together. So because I have a directional fabric for my cork, I'm making sure that this is my top edge right here. You can see my flowers kind of stand up. I'm going to take one of these pieces, right side down, and I'm just going to add some clips. Now when it comes to sewing this, whenever you have fabric on the top and you have cork on the bottom, I like to flip it over like this and sew it this way. If I sew with the cork on top, the cork has a lot less stretch to it, almost minimum, and it's not going to stretch this piece. So I'm just gonna sew it with the cork on top, 1/4 of an inch from here all the way across using 1/4 of an inch seam and back stitching when I start and stop. I'll do the same thing for this one. Again, make sure that my flowers are right side up. Put my A piece. And the wax canvas doesn't really have a wrong or a right side. Technically, these would be right sides together if it was cork or a different kind of fabric. But since the wax canvas doesn't have a wrong or a right side, I don't really have to worry. But I have my pieces ready. Again, I'm going to turn this over, cork on top. So 1/4 of an inch right across here, make sure that I back stitch. And I am going to press this seam open before I do any top stitching. I completed step 3. I sewed my top and my bottoms together using 1/4 of an inch seam, making sure to back stitch. I pressed them open as best as I could. It's not always the easiest when you have cork and wax canvas. You don't want to put your hot iron on the wax canvas. So I just very gently used my finger and kind of held those edges down, and I did top stitching about 1/8 of an inch. It holds the seams down, so I really like how that looks. I've already gone ahead and started on step 4, and I marked my corners on each one following the pattern. So now I'm going to go ahead and cut the corners from the bottom of all 2 pieces, so all 4 corners. And you can use scissors, ruler, rotary cutter, whatever you prefer. I'm going to finish those up, and then I'm going to start on assembling my bag. I cut the corners from both of my pieces from the 2 bottom corners of each, which is my cork part. So now I have those ready to go. The corners are going to be boxed, so that's how we're going to get some depth to our bag. So I'm going to take my 2 pieces and put them right sides together and align my seams. And I'm just going to add a few more clips to each side so that I can take this to the machine and sew it. Align those seams. This is why I like pressing that seam open. If you don't want to press yours open and you want to press them in opposite directions, pressing 1/2 towards the top and 1/2 towards the bottom, you can do that as well. I just like to press it open. I feel like it gives my seams a cleaner look. So now I have this ready to go. I'm going to take this to my machine and I'm going to sew the sides as well as the bottom. I'm not going to do anything with the corners just yet. I'll show you how to box those afterwards. So using 1/4 of an inch seam, again, make sure that you back stitch. I'm going to sew both sides and across the bottom. I stitched my sides and the bottom using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. I back stitched when I started and stopped. And now I'm going to box the corners. So to complete step 5, to make some depth to your bag, you're going to take your corners here and we're going to flatten them out. So essentially I'm pulling this seam and this seam together and straightening this piece out. So I just like to reach my fingers in and I'll just do this and kind of pull that straight. When you're boxing corners like this, here's a few tips to make them look really nice and crisp. Nest your seams, put one in going in each direction so that they lay nice and flat, and pull this as straight as you can. Your corners quite often want to do this where they get kind of an arch to them. Pull that straight. Don't be afraid to do that. And with this bag, it's actually quite easy, but with some of the other bags, if they have a lot of thickness or a lot of seams, it can be kind of hard to do that. So again, here is my other side. Here's the 2 seams that I sewed, and I'm just straightening those edges out. and pushing them in opposite directions. I have not pressed anything. I don't bother to press at this point. I'm just gonna straighten that out. And you can see here, it's very minute, but there's a little tiny bit where this corner was not even. I can take my scissors and I can trim that little tiny bit, or I can just leave it and put it in the seam allowance. Sometimes your corners will not line up perfectly if your cutting is a little bit off, and it's nothing to stress about. So just like that, I'm gonna take these to the machine, sew 1/4 of an inch across there, and then I'll be ready to turn this right side out and complete step 6. Step 5 is complete. I sewed my sides, my bottom, and I boxed my corners. So now I'm ready to turn this right side out. And again, at this point, I have not done any pressing. Since I have cork and wax canvas, I'm probably not gonna do much pressing. The wax canvas, you could just use your fingers to press. And the cork, I might need a little bit of pressing on the bottom, but I'm actually gonna wait until my bag is done. I find that since I'm gonna be turning this and doing some other things, that I'd rather not press now and then press again later. I'll just press once. So it's turned right side out. I have to say, I'm really loving this combination of these two. So now that I have this done, I just need to add my handle. So I have my handle here that we completed earlier. And all I'm going to do is I face this so that the hardware, the slide set, is facing in towards my bag. And I take my seam right here and the edge of my handle and just place those right next to each other like this. And then bring this around. Make sure that I am not twisting anything. Again, my slide set faces inward. We want these right sides together so that they're right side out when they're done. And I'm gonna put this end right here, right next to this seam, and add a clip. Now that that's ready, I'm just gonna take this to the machine, sew a few times back and forth within the seam allowance on each of these. My outside is all done and my handle is on. I love how quickly this bag goes together and starts to actually look like a bag. It already looks completed. So I just have to do my lining, which is what I'll work on next. Before I go on to that, I am going to add a handmade tag. So if you would like to add one too, now is a great time to do it. I prefer to do it when the outside is done so I can find the placement for it. Sometimes when the bag is, in process, I'm not sure where I want it to go. So do I want to put it off to the side or up at the top? Big decisions. I usually put it up here. I think I'm going to put it down on the side. Let me look at my finished bags. Okay, so these two I just put in the center. I think I am going to put it down on the side, do something a little bit different. So I'm just going to take my washer here. And the reason I also like to do this is because I am putting this off to the side. What if I put it too far and it looked awkward or it was in my way? Now I know that I like it about right there. So I'm just going to put my washer here. And I need to mark 1 in from each end. So I'll just use my chalk pencil here. I'm just kind of eyeballing it. You can measure it, use a ruler, whatever is easier. And I'm going to take my seam ripper and just rip. I like to poke it in one end and out the other and then straight across. I find I'm a little bit less scared of going right across. If I poke it right in here and then try to work my way, I could rip the bag, and I don't want to do that. You can also use small scissors, whatever is easier. I put that in, make sure it looks straight. And I think it's a little low on this side. So let me just take a few more threads. That looks better. All right, and I'll just reach in here. You can put a little bit of interfacing or something behind that. I find that because it's not weight bearing that I don't really need to put anything there. I'm not gonna have anything hanging off of this. It's not that kind of hardware. And I just push my ends inward on top of each other. And there. All done. So my handmade tag is on, my outside is complete. Now I am ready to move on to step 7 and start working on the inside. Step 7 is going to be adding the inside zippered pocket. And this, I do have a full tutorial on YouTube. I'm going to walk you through the steps in the pattern, but I am going to go a little bit more quickly for this tutorial. If you want a really in-depth tutorial, please go ahead and watch that video as well. That's going to include a recessed zippered top as well as the zippered pocket. And there's lots of great tips and tricks and shortcuts in that. So for this, I'm going to need my D. I'm going to need my E, which is my pocket piece. This has no interfacing, the D piece does. I have 2 of these, I've just set the other one aside. I also have my 10-inch zipper, I have some pins, and I have my 1/4-inch wide fusible tape. So on the back of my D piece, and remember, this is wider than it is tall. You don't want your piece this way, you want it like this. It's wider this way. On the back here, following the pattern measurements, I went ahead and I drew my box here. Remember, if your lines here extend further, it does not matter. It's totally fine. Mine just happened to work out the exact same width, which never happens. I also have a little center mark here so that I know how where I want this to be placed. Just follow your measurements to draw this box. You're going to be sewing around the outside of this box, and you'll be cutting with the inside lines. And that will make sense for you in just a minute. So if you have a directional piece of fabric, this is your top. So if you have something like my cork where it has an actual direction, make sure this is the bottom and this is the top. This is where we'll be cutting corners from in a later step. So I've drawn this out, and I'm going to take my fabric right here for my E piece. Now I am using an Essex linen, so it doesn't have a wrong or a right side, but for today, this is going to be my right side. So my right side is facing up. The right side of my D piece is facing down. I want these right sides together. And for this piece right here, for the top, it doesn't usually matter, and you'll see that in my other tutorial where I tell you that it doesn't matter for the placement. But in this video, for this particular bag, because of what we're going to do with this pocket later, you want to leave about 3 inches here. So it doesn't matter if it's exact, but you just don't want it to be too short, and you'll understand why in a later step. So I'm leaving at least 3 inches. It could be a little bit more, that's fine. And I'm centering this. If you want to find the center of this pocket, you can, but I'm just kind of eyeballing it. And I'm going to take some pins, make sure it's nice and straight. And I'm just going to pin up here. And I'm going to pin the bottom corners as well. 4 pins is enough just to keep this in place, keep it nice and flat, because when you're ready to sew, you don't want anything to flip up and get caught, because then you'll have to break out your seam ripper. When I'm sewing, this is going to be on the top and this will be on the bottom, and what I don't want to happen is for this piece to fold up. So now that I have this pinned in place, I'm going to take this to my machine and sew on the line all the way around the outside. I'll come back here with my pins in and I'll show you how to do the cutting step. I stitched around the outside of the box only on my sewing machine. I use my regular stitch length for that. And now what I'm going to do is cut on this center line. And I want to cut between the points of the V's that I have. And here's a tip for you. If your V's are not perfect, or if you overcut or undercut, it's not the end of the world. What you want to do when you're doing this cutting is pay attention to where you stitched. And what I mean by that is, if you can see right here, this line that I drew is kind of off. It's not right in the corner. When I cut, I want to get my scissors right into that corner. The reason is that's how we're going to get this to lay really flat. So let me show you what I mean. I'm just going to start with my seam ripper on the center line here. And you can do this with your mat and rotary cutter, whatever you want to do. And I'm just going to cut just a little bit so I can get my scissors in there. And this does not have to be perfect at all. I'm just going to cut right to that V, and then I want to get my scissors all the way into this corner as close to, without cutting through the threads, as I can. I don't want to cut the stitching that I just did. And what I'm going to do on this end is I'm going to purposely not cut all the way to the corner because I want to show you what happens. So I'm going to cut back a little bit, and I'll show you what that looks like when it's not perfect. So just remember, this corner right here on my right, I did not cut perfectly. So let me show you what happens. So I take my pins out and I'm going to pull this pocket piece through to the back. Just like that. And I'm going to take this to my iron and I'm going to pull this so that the seam is nice and flat, and so this opens. Okay, I want a nice 1/2 inch wide opening. And when I do that, and I look over here, you see those little wrinkles that I have here and how they're not coming out? But over here, just by gently tugging with my fingers. This is nice and flat. That's what happens when you don't cut all the way into your corner. So by taking my scissors and cutting a couple more little threads, it's not even 1/8 of an inch, it's barely a 1/16. Just cutting a couple more threads and getting right into the corner. Now, look how much flatter that lays. So I'm going to take this to the ironing board, give this a really good press, and I'll come back and show you how to add your zipper. I took my piece over to the ironing board and I gave it a really good press from the front and the back, so I have a nice clean opening here. Take a look at the back here. I've already put some tape on it, but do you see how flat that is? That is what happens when you cut into your corners really well. So I took my fusible tape, it's 1/4 inch wide, and I just fused a piece onto either side of the long edge. You don't have to do anything with the short edges. I have not found that it's made any difference over the years. So I'm going to peel my paper off. If you have any problems like that with your paper ripping, sometimes it just needs to be warmed up a little bit more or fused down better. Let's try on this end. It came off. Okay, so if that rips on you and doesn't want to come off, just take it back to the ironing board. So before I do anything with my zipper, I'm going to put my pins back in. I just want to make sure that this pocket doesn't flip while I'm sewing. Again, if it gets caught up in my zipper, I'm just going to have to bring the seam ripper out, and that never makes me happy. So at this point, this should be the right side of your fabric facing you. The wrong side should be facing down, and this is the inner facing side of my D piece that's facing up. So now that I have my tape in place, I'm going to take my zipper, and I'm going to do this at the ironing board, and place my zipper right side up on the ironing board, just like this. And I'm going to take this piece right side down, placing it right on top, and getting this nice and even. And when I'm happy with the placement of my zipper, I can go ahead and fuse it in place. And then I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and stitch about 1/8 to 1/16 of an inch all the way around the edge here. I fused my zipper in place and then stitched all the way around about 1/8 of an inch or so. Now that that's finished, I'm going to close up the pocket. First things first is just to trim off the end of the zipper. I don't need that excess there. This side is fine, so I'll leave that. I just don't want the zipper tape getting caught in the seam allowance and adding more bulk. So if you've done one of these zippered pockets before, you probably are familiar with the finishing steps. We're going to take the bottom edge and the top edge and bring those together. The difference in this pocket though, because we're going to be turning the bag through this pocket when we're done, we have to do two things. First, we are not going to sew all the way across here. We're just going to sew about 1 inch or so on each side, leaving a large opening. Second, so we don't forget, you're going to turn your pocket over and unzip. If it's not unzipped, it's going to be really hard when it comes time to turn this, to turn your bag. So I'm going to take this to my machine, and I'm just going to stitch across here about 1 inch and 1 inch, make sure that I back stitch. Then I'm going to pull my pocket down, let it hang down towards the bottom of the bag. So if my zipper is up here, my pocket will be hanging down, and then I'm going to sew my sides. I am not sewing them to the lining itself. I am just going to fold that back, stitch 1/4 of an inch, fold this back and stitch 1/4 of an inch, and I'll come back and show you how that looks. I pulled the bottom and top edge together. I stitched across just on the sides about 1 inch, and I have a nice big opening here. Then I let my pocket hang down towards the bottom of the bag. That's really important with zippered pockets. You always want your pocket hanging where it would naturally hang in the bag. I closed up the sides. I did not sew them to the lining. So now this is complete. Leave your zipper open. That's going to be really important for the finishing steps. You don't want to close this up. So now we'll get ready to move on and make our divider. I have my 2 F pieces here. These are lining fabric and they are interfaced. These are going to be for the inside divider. So I took the measurements in the pattern and I already cut my corners. Again, if you have a directional fabric, this is the top. The bottom is where you're going to cut your corners. So I just used my ruler and I measured over and up as the pattern says, drew a diagonal line, and I cut both of my corners. And like I normally do, I cut one and use that to cut the other one to make sure that they came out even. So now that I have these ready, I'm going to place them right sides together, just like this. I'm going to take this to my machine, stitch 1/4 of an inch across the top, which is your longest straight edge. Remember, your piece is wider than it is tall. I'm also going to stitch the corners. So I'm going to stitch using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance from here to here and all the way across the top, making sure to backstitch. My sides and the straight part of the bottom, those are not going to be finished. They will be finished in a seam later. So I'm going to take this to my machine and I'll come right back and show you how it looks. My top and my diagonal bottom corners are all stitched. I made sure to backstitch. I used a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now that I'm done, I'm going to turn this right side out and take it over to my iron and give this a really good press before I top stitch. And I'm just going to top stitch the top edge, which is the longest edge. I'm going to press this really well. And I'm just going to do probably a 1/4 inch top stitch. So just want to press that and I'll stitch right across here. Once that's done, I'll set that aside and we'll start working on the recessed zipper. I top stitched the top edge only of my divider. I used a 1/4 inch seam. You can do whichever you would like, a 1/4 or an 1/8. And I just stitched right across here. These edges and the bottom are still raw edges. Those will get sewn into seams. And I didn't do any top stitching on my corners down here. So this is all set. I'm going to put that aside for now. And let's work on the recessed zipper. So you're going to have 4 pieces. These are your G pieces. And you're going to prepare each of them the same exact way. So I want to show you in steps what this looks like. Again, I do have a full, very in-depth tutorial on YouTube if you would like to watch that as well. So what you're going to do with each of these, and please keep in mind, if you have a fabric like mine that does not have a wrong and a right side, be very mindful of where you're putting your tape. I'm using this fusible 1/4 inch tape for the entire prep work. I do all of it at my ironing board. So you want to be very careful. If you have fabric that has a wrong and a right side, it will be a little bit easier for you. So what I did first is on the wrong side. So this is what I'm calling my wrong side on this piece. I took my fusible tape on both of the short ends. You'll do this on all 4. And I fused my tape down just like this. With the paper on, I folded it over and pressed so that I could get a really crisp edge. Then I just take my paper off and I fuse my edge down just like that. So now my piece looks like this. So on the wrong side, I have 2 folded over short ends so they're nice and clean. Now I'm going to take this piece and flip it over so it is right side up. So I'm onto this one right now. So on each of them, on the right side, I'm going to take a piece of tape along one long edge. It really doesn't make a difference which one. If you have directional fabric and you want to fuss with it, that's fine. This is the edge that will be closer to your zipper. I'll show you in the finished bag. So maybe it will make a little bit more sense. So this is what I just completed down here, my short ends. Let me open that up a little bit. So I just did my short ends. And now I'm working on this edge right here. So the edge that's closer to the zipper gets the tape. So I'm going to fuse a piece of tape on one long edge, just like this. And then I'm going to do the same thing where I take this and I fold it back. So I'm folding it towards the wrong side and pressing to give it a really nice clean edge. Now I can take this paper off and fuse it onto my zipper. So you're going to prepare all 4 of your pieces the same way. And before you can do any sewing, we also have to prepare our zipper. So I have my zipper here. This is definitely much longer than I need it to be. I didn't do any trimming yet. And what I'm going to do is take this to my machine. If you're using the type of zipper that has stoppers on it, remove those so that you don't have to worry about sewing through the metal. And you're going to take your piece and just kind of curve it like that, like an L shape. Just like this. And I try to get them as even as I can. That's pretty good. And I'll put a pin in here. So I'm going to finish preparing these so that they all look the same. And I'm going to take this to the sewing machine. I'm just going to stitch across here, just a couple of stitches. That will be hidden by this fabric, so don't worry how it looks. Just put a couple of stitches in, and then I'll come back and show you how to put these pieces of fabric onto the zipper. I finished prepping my G pieces. They are all exactly the same. So right now, this is my right side. I have all of the clean edges on the right side. When I turn this over to the back, this is my wrong side. My short ends are fused down, so they're fused to the wrong side. And this piece for the top is folded back towards the wrong side. It's not fused down, and my paper is still on. So again, right side, wrong side. I have my zipper ready here, and I wanted to give you a little trick. I did not sew with the pin in, but I just wanted to show you how I take it to my machine. because I see this happen. I used to see this a lot in class where people would get frustrated. They would get their zipper perfect, they take their pin out and put it under the foot, and then their curve would open up. So when I'm sewing it, I leave my pin in just like this. I get it to my machine and I put my foot down. I put it right on top of here and I put my needle down. I take a stitch or two. I don't sew through pins, so I just like to get it started. Once I've got the needle in there so that it is holding the pieces together, then I will take my pin out like that and just do a couple stitches. And you don't have to go in the same direction as the fold. I go the opposite way, so I'm actually stitching that way. So this is all set, and so are my pieces. Again, I'm going to do this at the ironing board, but I'll show you how this looks so you can prepare yours. So I put my zipper right side up on my ironing board. 2 of these pieces are gonna go on the front side and 2 are gonna go on the back. So I'm just gonna peel my paper off. If your paper doesn't wanna peel off, just warm it up with your iron again. All right, so I'm gonna take 2 of these and just set them aside. I'll take this and I'm just gonna zip my zipper up. My goal here is to get my fabric close, but not too close where the zipper pull will get caught, and it's to cover up this end. You don't want to put this down here. You don't want to see this end. We did this so that the zipper pull would not come off, but also so that it looks nice and clean. If you had an end like this, your zipper pull could come off. You wouldn't want to put your fabric down here. So you're going to set this. I make sure that that little end is tucked in, and I am probably a scant 1/4 of an inch away. You have a little bit of wiggle room here. You don't want to put your piece right up against the teeth because you won't have room for your pull. Once that gets caught, it's really hard to get it undone. So you want to be really, really careful so that you're not making this harder for yourself when you're done. So I'm going to pretend I'm fusing this. I'm just pressing that down for now. And now I'll line this one up. I'm going to line up these ends, and I'm going to try to get it about the same width away. And before I do anything, I like to just check, and my zipper pull is definitely not going to get caught. I'm going to put a clip down here because when I'm sewing, it's easier to have the pull open. So once I fuse these down, I'll turn this over, take these pieces, and I know where to line them up. I can line up this raw edge, line up those sides, get that in place, and do the same thing over here. So once I have those all in place, I will take this to the sewing machine and sew it, but let me fuse them down first and I'll show you how it looks. I fused my G pieces down. I have 2 on the top and I have 2 on the back. I used my edges here and my edges here to line everything up. My zipper pull opens without getting caught. The reason I'm really cautious about that, I had a student many years ago who was not really careful and didn't check it. And when she got her purse finished, when she was completely done, her zipper got caught on the back pieces. They were up too far and she was not able to open or close her purse. The zipper was completely jammed. So I don't want to see that happen to you. So just make sure that your pull opens with no issues. I have a clip down here because I'm going to add a tab when I'm done. I'm just not going to do that right now. And it is a lot longer. You do have this long tail. You don't want to cut that down. It will make your finishing steps really hard. With a recessed zipper, you're always going to have a tail, and I'll show you how I like to add a tab on. I have a really quick cheater method that's even quicker than the one that's in the pattern. So now that I have these on, I like to take it to my machine with my zipper open. I just find that it's a lot easier to sew, and I'm going to be sewing around each side by itself. I'm not going across the zipper. If I go across the zipper and close this, my zipper pull is not going to work. So I want to treat these as 2 separate sides. I use an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I start out here. These raw edges are going to go in a seam, but if I sew them, it keeps them together, makes the finishing steps easier. So I'll start out here, stitch around, and then come over here and also stitch around. You want to be stitching all of your edges. Don't leave the ends open, and make sure that you catch your top and your bottom. If you line these up and you use the zipper tape to do your folding and your pieces are the same, you should have no issues. So I'm going to go to my machine, do my stitching, and then add my tab on. I stitched around both sides of my recessed zipper. Best tip I can give you, make sure that you use matching thread so that you can't see if your corners aren't perfect. Mine are not perfect, and that's okay. So I stitched around each side. I did not go across the zipper, so my zipper will still open and close. And now I have this end here that I need to address. So in the pattern, it shows you how to do it with fabric or cork. I am using cork for my tab, and all I've done is cut a piece of cork that's the same width as my zipper. That will depend on what you're using. Mine is about 1.25 inches, and I cut it 2 inches long. I find that 1 inch for a finished tab, it'll be 1 inch once you fold it over, is good. So I just cut 2 inches by the width of my zipper. You can take this to your machine and stitch around it. You can stitch an X, whatever you would like. But here's my super easy cheater hack that I've been doing. Because sometimes my stitching is not perfect, I like to just take my Gutermann glue and I add it right on the back of the cork. I get close, but not right on the edge because it's gonna, kind of push out a little bit. I use this glue for everything. Put a little on there. And then I will just take this and kind of just eyeball that and fold it over. Give that a good press, and while it's drying, I can just add a clip. Sometimes I'll even take it over to the iron and press it for a few seconds and then put my clapper on top. So that is all done. And now it's time to start preparing the lining to add all of our pieces and start assembling. To assemble the lining, you're going to need your divider. You're also going to need your recessed zipper, and you're going to need your lining pieces. You have one with a zippered pocket and one without. So the first thing that you're going to do is, as per the pattern, you're going to trim a strip from each of your lining pieces from the top. Do not throw those out. I've also gone ahead and trimmed my corners down here just like I did earlier for the outside. So this is my bottom, my zipper is up towards the top, and this is my top edge. So I trimmed my strips. We are going to use these, so don't throw those out. What you're going to do is also make some marks. I just do it on one of my pieces as per the pattern after I've done my trimming. That is going to tell us where to line up the divider. So to start, I'm just gonna start with the one that has a zippered pocket. It really doesn't matter, but the reason that I always start with this half is because I like my zippers in the same direction. So if my pull is down here for this is open, remember? Make sure that's open. I also like this zipper to be on that side. It's just one of those things that I do. It really doesn't make a difference though, unless it matters to you. So I'm going to start with my bottom piece here and my top strip here and my recessed zipper. I'm going to take this piece, I'm gonna take my zipper. You can find the center. I just eyeball mine, so it's totally fine if you wanna, find the centers of each of your pieces. And I'm going to place my zipper on here. So when I'm doing a recessed zipper, I always repeat to myself, up, up, down. There is going to be a part in this process where you are going to think it's incorrect, and I will show you why, and I will show you where you probably have a little bit of a panic, but don't. If you follow me and have faith in the process, you will be fine. So my bottom piece is right side up. My zipper is right side up. I'm just kind of eyeballing it in the center. My little strip here is right side down. So that is the only interfacing that I see. I'm gonna take my clips and clip all these pieces together. And if it's easier for you, you can use pins. You can clip the zipper first so that it doesn't move. I'm making sure that all of these edges are lined up. So the edge of my small strip and my bottom strip and my zipper are all lined up. I'm using as many clips as I need. And I'm gonna go to my sewing machine and I'm just gonna stitch 1/4 inch all the way across here, making sure to backstitch. I placed my pieces and stitched 1/4 inch all the way across. When I was done, I pressed my seam up. It really doesn't make a difference, and a lot of times I don't press because sometimes I forget to do that. So don't worry, if you want to press up or down, it does not make a difference. So I have these pieces done. Now I'm going to add my second short strip and my second long strip. So I'm going to take this other piece. This has no pockets. Place this right side up. I'm going to grab this half of my zipper. So I want the half that I haven't sewn yet. That's also going to be right side up. And I'm centering that as best as I can. I'm using the sides here to make sure it's pretty good. And I'm going to take this strip and place it right side down. So again, up, up, down. The bottom is right side up, the zipper is right side up, the strip is right side down. Make sure all of my edges are lined up. And take this back to the machine, stitch 1/4 inch across here, making sure to back stitch. Because I press this seam up, I'm actually going to press this seam down towards the larger piece. It'll help those nest together when I'm doing my finishing steps. So I'll be right back. I finished stitching the other side, and I did press this seam going down, so it is facing down towards the larger part, and this one is pressed up. That is going to make it a little bit easier for the finishing steps, but again, a lot of times I don't press at all, so it really doesn't make a huge difference, but I just like to show you some of the tricks that I do when I'm not being super lazy. So now that this is done, before I add the divider, I want to show you why you're still okay, because there is going to be a point, and there always is, even when you're following along, where somebody emails me and says, this is wrong, my zipper is upside down. And when you're looking at your zipper like this and you see it right side up, you see the wrong side of your lining pieces. When you turn this over to the right side of the lining, you see the wrong side of your zipper, and that is usually what throws people off. Our brain says, if this is right side up, this should be too. But here's why this is correct. If I am inside of my bag and I am looking up, out, I would be seeing the back side of the zipper. When this is in my completed bag and I look down, this is what I'm going to see. So here's one of my completed bags right here. And when I look down, here are the strips right here. And when I look into the bag, that is what I'm seeing. So from inside the bag, I would be seeing the back side of the zipper. So as long as it looks like this, you are doing just fine. So now I'm going to open this up, and I have the half that I made my marks on facing down. So I have that on my table. I'm going to take my divider, and your divider is not as wide as your bag. There's a reason for that. When you box your corners, it's going to be taking some of the width away. So we want the divider to be smaller. So you have not made a mistake. This is how it's supposed to look. So what I'm going to do on side one is take the top of my divider and the little mark that I made, and I'll line those up and add a clip. And I'll add a clip down here too. I'm going to pull this half of my lining down, and I'm going to line these up. And I want to line up the corners down here like this. I'm going to move this clip. So I have a sandwich here. I have my 2 lining D pieces, and I have my divider in the center. I'm going to take my zipper and tuck my zipper in. I don't want that zipper tail hanging out. And I'm going to make sure that these small strips are upright. Don't tuck them down. We want our fabric right sides together. So I'm lining up that seam. I nested those seams together. And now I have everything where I want it. I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and just stitch down this side. Normally when we're finishing a lining, we're sewing around, but we're not going to do that yet. The divider makes this a little bit different. So just sew with a 1/4 inch seam down this edge, and then I'll show you how to finish the opposite side. I stitched down with a 1/4 inch seam down my first side. So when I open this up, this is what I see. I have my lining pieces right sides together, and now my divider is stitched in on this side. So in order to finish up the other side, I need to pull this edge and this edge together, and I need the divider in there. So the divider is going to kind of make this bubble up a little bit. It's going to look funny, but don't worry. So I'm pulling my divider to the other side, lining up on the mark I made earlier, and adding a clip. And this time I like to add a few extra clips because the fabric is going to be kind of fighting against me and pulling towards the other side. Once I have that in place, I'm going to do the same thing. Fold this together, line up the bottom edges, do that, just keep adding clips. So I have my lining, my divider, and my little short pieces are upright, just like that. and now I'm ready to sew. It does look kind of wonky. It's all bubbled up, but that's totally fine. That's how it's gonna look for right now. So I will sew this seam using a 1/4 of an inch seam and back stitching. I'm all stitched on my sides, so now it's time to close up the bottom. So normally when I am making a lining, I leave an opening in the bottom for turning, but I already left this opening in the zippered pocket, so I don't have to do that. And I did that for this bag because of the divider. But if you like this technique and you have a zippered pocket in your bag, you can absolutely use that for turning for any bag. So what I'm gonna do now is bring my 2 bottom edges together. There's my corners right here and my divider. So again, it's gonna get kind of bubbled together and it's gonna look kind of weird. And you can definitely find the center here. Again, oops, there went that clip. I'm just kind of eyeballing this and I am definitely off. It would have been easier if I found the centers, but I'm always up for a challenge. So I'm just kind of eyeballing that. And I'm clipping the bottom of the divider to one of my bottom halves. And now I'm going to do the same thing I did on the sides. This looks terrible. I am well aware of that. It is bubbled up. It doesn't look like anything fits, but it's because we haven't boxed the corners yet. So that's why it's a little bit weird, but it's all gonna work out. So now that I have that done, I'm gonna sew all the way across the bottom and then I'll be ready to box the corners and finish this up. I hope you're still trusting me at this point. I know everything looks really off, but we're almost done. So now that my sides and the bottom are closed and I did not leave an opening because I don't need to, I'm gonna box my corners just like I did on the outside. And you're not catching the bottom or the side of the divider, so you are still just sewing through the corners, but your divider being sewn in there can make it a little bit of an extra challenge. So just take your time and again, flatten those seams right out, nest them together. And just like that, now I'm going to sew the corners and then we will put the inside and the outside together and we're almost done. Okay, corners are all boxed. Everything is ready to go to do my final steps. When I look down into my bag, there is my zipper. It's kind of tucked down in here. So that's what that looks like. I still have my zipper tail tucked down. It's just on one side of the divider. This again is why you don't want to cut your recess zipper really tight because it would have made that those final steps kind of hard. There's my divider. It's sewn in on the sides and the bottom, so I have these 2 separate compartments, and my zippered pocket zipper is still open. So in the pattern, it mentions that this is a good bag if you like to do drop-in linings. It's a good one to use for that. I am not a big fan of drop-in linings, so I am not going to show you that today. I do have another video when I introduce the Lola pattern that talks about drop-in linings. So if you are familiar with that and you like that technique, you can absolutely use that to finish up this bag. And all that means, if you're not familiar, is that the edges of this outside are clean and this inside are clean. They're kind of folded back, and I literally can drop my lining into the outside. And then I just top stitch and I'm done. But for today, I'm going to show you how I do it as it's written in the pattern. So what I need to do, just like I do with other bags, is I need to put the outside in the lining. So my outside is right side out, my lining is wrong side out. But I have this divider in here, so how am I going to get this in there? So what I do is I just kind of roll this up a little bit and I put this right on one side. I don't care which side. I'm going to take my handle and I'm also going to put that in there because when I'm sewing this, tuck my zipper down, the only thing that I want to be sewing is this skinny edge of the lining and the very top edge of the outside. So this is a little bit awkward, but you can kind of work it half at a time. So what I'm going to do is take this seam right here and this seam and line those up. I push my lining seam in the opposite direction of the handle because I don't want to make it too thick. And I'll clip right there, and then I come over. I always do my seams on the side first. My handle's sewn in correctly, so I'm not worried at this point about anything twisting. Everything's already been put in the bag. I am going to trim these threads though. I get those later. All right, so now that I have that in there, I'm just going to go around 1/2. And if it's easier for you, take this to the machine, sew this half, and then go ahead and clip the other half, if that's easier. I am going to do the entire thing at once. I'm just going to take my time, make sure everything is flat. So again, I am only catching this top edge and this top edge. My zipper is down, my divider is not getting caught. None of my zippers are getting caught in here. And the wax canvas actually helps because it's very pliable. Sometimes when I've done an all cork Lola, this step is a little bit more challenging because the cork isn't as flexible. Pushing that zipper out of the way. My recessed zipper is open, like all the way open, because it helps to give me a little bit of extra room. And I've got a tiny little bubble here, so I'm just gonna space that out a little bit. This happens sometimes because your pieces are actually the exact same size. So sometimes you'll get a little bubble. As long as they're pretty much the same size, it will work. So I'm going to take my table off my machine so that I can put this right on there. So if you have a free arm on your sewing machine, you're definitely gonna wanna use it for these last couple of steps. I'm gonna put this on there and I'm gonna sew around. Because of all of the bulk and things that are in my way and the clips, I'm gonna sew around twice. I find that my first go around the top edge is never perfect. It's always a little bit off. So I'm gonna do it a second time without the clips. That way I can really get it nice and smooth and fix any areas that didn't come out perfect. I stitched around the top of my bag. I did do it twice. If you can see here, my stitching is kind of off because my first pass was pretty bad. So I went back in and straightened it out and did a nice solid 1/4 inch. So now that this is done, I'm gonna use that zippered pocket and turn my bag right side out. So I just grab the outside first, and I find that instead of pulling, that it's actually a little bit easier to turn and kind of just keep working the bag out like this. Really poke those corners out. And you can see the divider. This is why it has those little angled corners, so that you don't get it caught when you're trying to box your corners, and it helps everything to lay really flat. So now the only thing I have left to do is to close this zippered pocket and top stitch. So just like I would normally do, I'm just gonna turn these edges under just a little bit, about 1/4 inch. And I will stitch about 1/8 inch along this edge, tuck that back inside the zippered pocket. Nobody will ever know that it was there. I love finishing bags this way. Sometimes I'm not sure why I don't finish all my bags this way, but I don't. But this is a great technique that you can use for any bag that has a zippered pocket. And I'll close that up, tuck that back in, tuck my lining into the outside, press it as, best as I can, and then I'm gonna top stitch and I'll be all good to go. My Lola is all done. I did my top stitching, I closed up my zippered pocket, so let's take a look at the finished bag. Here's my recessed zipper. I tucked my little end right down into the bag. You can leave it hanging out if you would like. My zippered pocket is complete, it's all closed up. So there's that little seam right there. I just folded my edges together and then tucked it right back in. I have my divider, and because there's nothing in it, the divider kind of just wants to sit on one side, but once I put things inside of there, it will do its job and give me 2 separate compartments. I've got my adjustable handle, so I am all set to go. I hope you enjoyed this video. I can't wait to see your Lola Crossbodies. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe and click the little notification bell. I upload from Facebook every Friday afternoon. It's our Facebook Live. And I also add tutorials like this one as often as I can. As I always say, Facebook is for fun, tutorials are for learning, so I hope you learned a lot today. Thanks for joining me.